You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Lian Brooke-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And the next way that we are guiding people down this path is via the new evolution of Waking the Wild Sovereign. And it's now full with the sovereigns who chose into what will likely be the deepest, most powerful work of their lives. This particular crucible is a real milestone in our work of Waking the Wild too, as Wake the Wild Sovereign is really the jewel in our crown. And this evolution means that jewel is now shining even more magnificently. So pleased to be doing this incredible work. So if you missed out on joining us for this one, then do join our free Facebook group and sign up for our excellent and moonly newsletter to find out what's coming next on this path. You can join those by going to facebook.com/group/primalhappiness for the group and primalhappiness.co/moonly. That's MOONLY, because it's sent out on the full moon and the new moon every month. And you can join either of those or both of those, and you'll be kept up to date with what's coming up next. And now onto this week's show. It's with Mellissa Seaman. Mellissa was a Stanford-educated business lawyer until her intuitive abilities awakened in the year 2000 with the birth of her daughter. Now she bridges the worlds of business strategy and intuitive intelligence. Creative designers, Fortune 500 executives, and thought leaders hire her to teach them how to channel their genius, to create on demand, to stay in their flow state, and to create lucrative businesses that follow their soul's calling. In this show, we spoke about Melissa's amazing story of becoming a channel of her soul gifts, how and why that happened, the work she now does with others so they can channel their genius, and finally, we talked about the 5 different types of soul gifts we can have. My goodness, we had a ball exploring this topic. Mellissa is amazing. In fact, she's fast becoming a new friend, and I cannot wait to share this episode with you. Let's dive in. Hello, Mellissa. A huge welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here with you, Lian. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, it was clear we had one conversation and we're like, oh yeah, of course. I have to come on your show. You have to come on my show. We need to we then need to have like several meetups in various parts of the world. So yeah. So we are going to have a conversation that I am so excited to have. It really is. When we spoke, I was saying, oh my goodness, there's so much alignment between what you're up to and what we're up to. And I honestly think there's very few topics that are as juicy as this in the entire world. So I know from the conversation we had before, you've got an amazing story in terms of how you ended up with the passion that you have around people being that kind of channel for their genius, or channel for that kind of soul gift to come through them. So I'd love to start there. Tell me how this happened. How did you get here?
Okay. It is a fun story because I never would have thought I'd end up here. I never would have thought I would be an intuitive, a professional intuitive working with leaders to open their, other abilities. Like I had no clue because I was, I was an academic. I was a Stanford graduate, and I went on to law school. I practiced as a business lawyer in litigation. And I thought I kind of had it made. I had my big house in San Diego near the beach, and I had my cars and my husband and my baby. And I was sort of, working hard in my Catholic church. I was very much active in my Catholic church, running retreats and participating in masses and planning cool events with my community. And I gave birth to my second child, my daughter, Claire Reese, in August of 2000. And that birth itself was this unexplainable, ecstatic, pain-free, fast experience that just really opened me up. And after that birth experience, I could see energy. I could see the layers of energy on people. I could see where it was blocked and causing them illness or upset. I could read energies in places. I could talk to the dead. I could, things that I had not thought was possible. I did not think these things were possible previously. So it was quite a shocker, right? To be suddenly one of those people. I'm like, oh no, I'm one of those weirdo spirit new agey people. And I thought, oh, I don't like that. I don't like the image that I had previously of those sort of spirit aware energy people was that they were flighty and ungrounded and unrealistic and irresponsible and living some fantasy. And so to suddenly be one of them it was embarrassing. And my parents and my husband at the time and my community in the Catholic Church were all as concerned as I was, and more so, And I remember, I do remember that inside myself, all of those things made sense. Like, oh, well, of course, that's what people's energy looks like if they were injured at this point in their lives. Oh, that makes sense. That, of course, spirit, our beloved dead can speak to us through these etheric, very soft, energetic ways. Like, that makes sense. Like, everything sort of made sense to me internally. It felt like, oh, right. Oh, that makes sense. Apart from, oh, that's bigger than I was taught. Oh, this is outside the box that I've always felt comfortable in. That part didn't. But most of my discomfort was when I would try to explain to other people what was happening, or when I brought that information to other people and the reactions it caused in them, which I fully understood because I always thought that stuff was nutsball too. But that created a lot of tension and confusion and pain. And, I felt really disconnected from my folks, my parents. I've always been so close to them. And so to have them kind of looking at me like, do you have postpartum depression? Well, but you're so happy. Oh, you're so happy. They actually came to me once about a year after I changed. And my dad said, your mother and I think we may have figured out what's going on with you. We think maybe it's something called masked depression. And it's masked because you seem so happy, but you couldn't really be that happy doing what you're doing and being who you're being. So it must be masking this horrible postpartum depression.
Oh my God.
And I was like, really? Maybe? Like, I don't know what the hell's going on with me. I thought maybe it was something more like, schizophrenia or something where I have my own reality, but maybe maybe I should go. I said, look, you guys are worried. Other people are worried. I feel great, but maybe I should be worried. So I'll go to whatever psychotherapist you want me to. Like, you guys pick out a psychotherapist. And Dad says, well, actually, it's easier than that. You can just take a blood test. And I was like, oh no, I don't know what that is. I'm not going to take a blood test to figure out if I have depression that looks like radical happiness. But that's just an example of the level of confusion and discord between the realities that were happening for me at that time.
Wow. It's just so many questions I want to ask. There's so many places that we can take this episode. I'm just like, wow. First of all, I just love it's almost like made for a story, like made for a book or a show, like it's so extreme from the reality you were in. And as I shared before, there's some parallels between my experience of having this kind of radical life shift, but yours is way more extreme. And I think it sounds as though there must have also been a kind of how could I say, having coming from a religious background, a religious community, I'm guessing what you were experiencing was kind of really running up against what you'd been told was safe, okay to stay within that community. So imagine that, as well as what was happening with your parents, must have been really challenging.
It really was. It really was. And so much of my role and identity has always been as a spiritual person. I've always had a deep connection with my God. And when I was in the Catholic Church, that was with, the saints and Jesus and Mary and, the cast of characters that God gets to shine through in a Christian tradition and particularly a Catholic tradition. And I continue to have the deepest reverence for, my Christian background and faith. And it's just that there were even more. There's more. There's more. And I remember pretty soon after I had this opening, I didn't really feel comfortable. When I went into my Catholic church, the church I grew up in, I was suddenly aware that there weren't enough women in the iconography and in the liturgy. And it was suddenly so blaring to me that it was out of balance. And I couldn't hang with that. I couldn't hang with it. I could feel what was incomplete, and it was so, in my view, so desperately incomplete and almost an offense to the Creator. I could now feel that I couldn't go. Of course I would go if I needed to, but I found reasons not to go to church anymore, and that had always been my safety. Now I was still hanging out with the same God. I'm still hanging out with, Jesus and the Marys and it's the same feeling, but I wasn't supported by that system anymore. And I went to my pastor, who was a dear friend, and it felt really scary to go to him and say, it was Father Peter Escalante. I love him. I talked to him when I was going through all of this, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I miss the church, and yet I don't miss the church. Like I'm getting all this coming through me. I'm healing. I'm helping people heal really swiftly with what I know and what I see. I'm clearing people of things that they've been struggling to clear. And it feels like a gift from God, not some curse. My mom was like, oh, does this mean you need an exorcism? I'm like, jeepers peepers. Well, I seem to be only having good effects in people's lives. So if it was something evil, wouldn't I be doing bad stuff? And I remember I went to my pastor and he listened to the whole story, and he said, well, I can tell you that from the church's position, there is no new prophecy. There is only what can be found in the Bible. And we are to rely on that more than whatever new information seems to be coming through, because it's hard to tell what new information is real and what might not be. And so we just rely on what we've got. He said, now I'll tell you my personal response in the moment. He said, if God came to me and gave me all those sorts of gifts, I'd go with it, man.
Oh, wow.
He said,
beautiful.
First and foremost, as a spiritual director, he said, of course, you need to roll with what God is showing you and guiding you. And as long as you can feel and know that that's the path of love, that you're not being pulled off in some other greedy direction or, off thing, then come on. Like you're being given gifts of the Holy Spirit. They're yours to follow.
Oh, it's so beautiful. That must have made a real difference.
Yeah. It was a very, and it was a heartbreaking day at the same time, because I was
your
left.
path ends here, but there is a door to a new path, which I imagine would be real great.
And when God comes calling, you didn't say, you don't say, oh no, I can't go because I'm already committed to this particular form of understanding you. And I'm not willing to grow beyond that, or I'm not willing to follow where you lead because I got to show up for these people on Sundays. Like it's, whew.
But as the human part of us, that is still going to be really scary. So, right, let me try and pick some of the questions I want to ask you. So, okay, I'm curious. What do you feel happened? Like, why do you think you opened up in that way with that birth? What do you think happened there? In some ways it doesn't matter, but I'm just really curious.
I wonder, my truth there right now is that, co-creating a human being is just about the biggest thing we get to do as humans, to actually birth, to co-create with spirit and with your partner, a human. Wow, that's power. And I do feel that in moments of birth and death, that there's a sort of portal that opens, a doorway that opens to a much bigger power and energy of the creator than we normally embody or have access to. And I think that anyone who's been present at a birth or a death can attest to the fact that something magical happens. The veil between the worlds becomes so thin. Some people report smelling roses. Some people report seeing light. There's just, it's where the mystical touches us so deeply. And while my first birth was also completely magical, it was a normal, 27-hour natural birthing experience, So I definitely wouldn't describe it as pain-free. The second one, it's almost like something inside of me, right? As soon as labor in quotation marks started, this channel, this conduit inside of me opened so wide that I felt tingly and boundaryless. I felt totally, while I felt tingly and boundaryless, I also felt this sensual awareness in my body that was so bright and sharp that I could feel. It felt like Clarice was spiraling down my spine to come out of my body. It felt like this incredible embodied ecstatic experience. And of course, the lawyer in my head is thinking, wow, these are good drugs. And I wasn't taking any pharmaceuticals, but I'm aware that when we're in a birthing process, the hormonal reality is very strong. And we create our own endorphins, and, that people can have really big experiences in those moments of extreme physical experience. And so even as I'm describing this incredibly pure mystical experience, my lawyer brain, my logical brain is in there going, well, it might have been the endorphins, Mellissa. You know, it might have been the fact that you were exuding more estrogen, blah, 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 oxytocin, blah, 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 pitocin, whatever. Who knows? You know, we'll never know. But my wisdom tells me that her birth was like a rebirth for me. And maybe her spirit was so big that she needed me to get bigger to mother her. Maybe it was my time to open up because I was 31 and I was at my Saturn return moment, and it was time for me to really claim my full path, which includes this, obviously, this deep intuitive ability.
Oh my goodness. I love what you shared there. And I can't remember if I told you, but when we spoke before about this, but my opening happened at the death of my father. And so what you're talking about, these portals that open from birth and death, just, oh my God, I could just feel as you were talking, like the same experience, obviously different, but such a similar experience happened for me. The day after he died, I was sitting with my family, and they're all in kind of different states of shock and grief and anger. And I just noticed, I just kept feeling like opening and bigger, and everything kept looking more beautiful. And I was so present to how much love there was. And I had similar thoughts over that year that, you know, like, what's happening to me? Like, I'm going like the opposite way to what's expected.
Yes.
To what grief and mourning should look like. But the way you've described it as those portals open is like the, you know, the veil between the worlds is thin, makes complete sense to me. Like, who knows why, but what you've said, it really, really resonates with my own experience. So thank you. So it sounds, from what you've described, despite the fact you had all this kind of like, what on earth's going on? You had messages from people around you saying like, this isn't okay. It sounds as though despite that, you were already kind of trusting enough and feeling the call enough to actually use those gifts in service to help people. I'd love to know, like, I guess, how did you know, I guess, A, to do that, and that also how did you have that deep enough trust, I'm guessing, and you may have experienced it differently, to be able to take action on that, to actually use those gifts in those ways?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I had my own little boutique law business because I was raising Colin, my first baby. And so I had transitioned out of working with firms to working on my own, advising mostly women-owned businesses. And so business ownership and entrepreneurship were my world. I was just advising businesses and helping them get structured. And so when this opened up in me, my brain shifted. I couldn't read contracts for hours at a time anymore. I couldn't do it. Like my brain, I relate with the story, the stroke of insight, the scientist who had that right brain awakening when she had her stroke. That very much, that really reflects my experience, where I just, that's not how my brain worked anymore. And I thought, well, I still need to make my money. I just still need to be of use in the world. What can I do with this new stuff? And so I learned to go into a light trance state, a shamanic journey state, using a drum beat, and move through people's energy fields and help their angels or their guides to heal them very swiftly. So it just made sense to me. Honestly, some people say that, well, that was pretty brave of you to go out and start a business. I thought, well, what else would I do? You know, I wasn't afraid of business or money or, you know, charging money and stuff like that, because I'd always been in business for myself. And so I just thought, well, I'll see what I can offer that's of use to people now. And so I pretty swiftly went from charging, you know, whatever I was charging back in, when was that? 2000. I was charging maybe $185 an hour as a lawyer. When I did my first few sessions doing this clearing work, I think I charged $50 just to make sure that it worked. And then after doing 10 of them, I thought, well, this is more useful than the stuff I was doing as a lawyer. So I just charged $185 an hour like I did as a lawyer, thinking, well, that's fair. And so I was pretty swiftly
I love that thought
paying
process.
my mortgage, Well, and people would come back for multiple sessions to get through various things that had been with them for years and years, because it really works so well. It just clears things when you clear things from the root, where they're anchored in someone's spirit body in their soul's plan. You clear it from there, it quits happening over and over again. So those patterns that we experience, in relationships or in our story with money, or those things that we just think, gosh, why does this always happen this way? Well, because it's rooted somewhere. And so one of the most fun and useful parts of my gift is I can go find where it's rooted, and like a lawyer, negotiate with it. Like, okay, I understand that this has been here because it was there to protect you when you were a kid, for example, from a certain person. But now it's getting in the way. Can we please untangle this now? Oh, we can't? Okay, great. Then we untangle it, we remove it, and the person's different, And so even as I say that, the lawyer brain in me is like, how is this possible? So the whole time,
I love the way you're like a lawyer.
How is this possible? That sounds like crazy pants. So I would always get the feedback from the client afterwards. How does it go? How do you feel now? And what do you know? After tracking my success rate over 10 years with this thing, I ended up with a 99.6% success rate with this sort of work, which still blows me away. Because I was all ready to give somebody their money back. Well, and I always told people if it doesn't work, let me know. I'll just give you your money back. It happened twice. One woman it happened for, and then a year later she called me and said, actually, it did all work. I was just mad at you. Okay. What the hell was that? The other person was like, I just didn't get it. You didn't get me. You didn't see me. And I'm like, finally. I mean, she was shocked because I was kind of relieved. Finally, it didn't work for somebody. Because it's freaky. It's not something that we're used to seeing. Not used to something we're used to talking about. Yeah. So it grew from there. And then I did that straight up sort of intuitive healing and clearing. I talked to people's dead for them. I cleared houses, including poltergeists and all this stuff that, again, I'd never thought this stuff was real before. I'm like, oh, look at that. That's real. Okay. And then I got pulled back into the world of business, and I realized that I didn't get pulled. I missed it. I missed the level of relevance and participation in the real world that business represents. Because some people say, oh, well, spiritual work shouldn't really be business, or you shouldn't charge money for spiritual work, or money shouldn't have anything to do with the sacred. And I'm like, oh, great. So that basically just sticks sacred in the closet. We can't use the sacred. We can't use the sacred gifts we're given. We have to only use the ones we learned in law school or some other school. Are you sure? These sacred gifts, boy, they can get stuff done fast. They can really accelerate us into new levels of creative power and good relationship and health and all that good stuff. Why aren't we using them again? Why aren't they part of business? That doesn't make sense to me anymore at all. So I am a stand, and I wave the flag of supporting people to channel their gifts, to channel their genius in the world of business, where stuff actually happens, where things change, the systems and the responsibilities and the relationships in the real world. I think that we should be activating our gifts and leveraging them and utilizing them. I would really like to see the most intuitive, gifted people make all the money and be the biggest leaders in the world, because I believe that as human beings, we're at our best when we are open to spirit and responsible in the world at the same time, acting as a conduit or a channel for our absolute highest genius to come through and do good things here. So I'm really devoted to the integration of intellect and intuition.
Yeah. Oh, I love that about you. And it feels to me that you having that call kind of back into the world of business feels, that's what you're here for.
It feels
not
like
that your
it, very
gifts
strongly.
aren't part of that, but there feels
Right.
like you doing what you're doing now makes complete sense. So I want to ask you one quick question about your story again, and then I do know we need to talk more about it. You might need to come back, actually. There's just too much here.
I'm having fun.
So very quickly, when you started working with people in that way, did you get training in that, or was that happening just very intuitively? I know you did then subsequently go on to train.
This is fun. So as soon as I opened up, I could feel spirit talking to me, and I used the metaphor, and I continue to use the metaphor of spirit guides because it kind of allows us to parse the creator into understandable personalities. It's not that I actually think there's a council of spirit beings necessarily that have personalities like humans do. It's more like it's a very helpful metaphor to get things done in that realm that we can connect to. And so my spirit guides were training me in all these things immediately. Like, oh, well, here's how you do this. And it felt like a download into my mind. And so then suddenly I knew it. So I was teaching what would download. I was sharing it because as I'd share it, I'd hear it. It would make even more sense to me. Other people could try it and I would get my proof positive. Oh yeah, that's real. That works. At a certain point, I thought, shouldn't I be getting training? Like I've been to a lot of school in my life and I love school. So maybe I'll go get trained. And so I went and I talked to a lady who ran school for psychics, and I told her what I was doing and that I was teaching it, and she said, "Oh, you have to be very careful because as soon as you go out into these worlds, there's all these horrible negative things that could happen to you, and there's all these bad things that are tracking you and pain." And I just thought, I choose not to believe any of this hoo-ha. Like this level of fear-based belief, I know is what creates protocols and dogmas. And right now I'm rather unlimited because I don't believe that it's scary. So I'm going to stick with that. And then I thought, well, I'm getting all this information that's coming through with animals and an indigenous looking spirit guides. And I don't want to be stealing someone else's culture. So I need to find a Native American person to train me. That makes sense. So I really prayed for that. And then Maria Yesbrew, who's a ceremonialist and of Tilshtayan tradition, which is kind of known as like she was on the White Mountains Apache Reservation when she grew up, was trained by her great grandfather and knows this beautiful cosmology of her people. She literally walked into my life one day and I was like, "Oh, good, you're here. Now you can train me." And she's like, "Oh, train you, huh? Okay, well, let's sit down." And we like smoked tobacco pipe and prayed together. And she said, "Wait a minute, you're already getting trained by your guides directly?" I said, yeah. But they're not showing me traditional stuff. And she's like, "Well, of course not. It's not your tradition." I'm like, "Well, aren't you going to teach me stuff?" She's like, "Look, in my family, we would train people until they heard their spirit guides. But your guides are much better teachers than any human's going to be." I'm like, "Oh, that doesn't really help me feel like I'm okay." He's like, "Oh, calm down."
This is a brain breaker for a lawyer, isn't it? Like,
totally. It's just like, what? It's all coming from my imagination. She's like, "Well, yeah, your imagination is spirit." I'm like, "Oh, jeepers." So she said, "Look, I'm going to adopt you. I'm going to make you my daughter. In my family, you're now my daughter." And she did a series of rituals with me, and she gave me a beautiful necklace, and she really welcomed me. And she's still like, she's my ma. When I go hang out with Maria, it's time with my Shima. But she said, I'll show you all the ceremonies. I'll definitely will do all the rituals. I'll guide you through the priesthood initiations, which she has. She said, but please understand that we're just trying to approximate what spirit wants. So if that's what's coming through you, then you're what we would call a speaker of holiness. You're already speaking through you what the holy ones want and what the new information is. And that was the other piece, is she had a lot to say about the prophecies of these times. She said, according to my great-grandfather, everything was going to get so shaken up between the year 2000 and 2012. The whole grid would be new. The whole earth would feel new. Everything would be new. Everything would accelerate. She's like, I've already been warned that a lot of the old rituals that my people have been doing for thousands of years won't really even work the same way after 2012. So she said, to be honest, that's why I've been seeking out other channels who are fresh and unprogrammed, because you're able to bring through this new information. And maybe between the two of us, we can create, we can, co-create together something that could work maybe for modern people. And that's been my work. And so now, like when I lead creative professionals through the 7 initiations to heal their life initiations from birth and childhood and puberty, and that's what we're doing. It's sort of a co-creation between the traditional wisdom that Maria shared with me so that I would share it with others, and the ways that then what's been coming through me has shifted that so that it can be accessible for modern people living in a modern world.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm really glad I asked you that question.
Me too.
So, it makes complete sense to me how you've ended up doing the work you now do with others. I'd love to hear your experiences of, I guess, 2 things. One, how people are coming to work with you. How are they getting this call? How are they getting this sense of something wanting to come through them? And also, are there sort of similarities in the types of genius that are coming through? Do you tend to find you're mostly working with kind of, intuitive, magical, spiritual people? I would just love whatever you've got to say on any of that, please.
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun to see what's happening now, because everybody seems to be moving towards their intuitive wisdom. And for some people, it's really scary because life is less structured and less knowable. And with everything that's happening in the world, with the internet becoming our collective brain, we're so connected now that it seems to be enhancing that movement towards intuitive connection. And that can be both scary and delightful, And that's also happening with people who have been in, the really high functioning business people. The people who really started coming to me when I began working with executives were Silicon Valley creative tech founders and innovators, because this intuitive, channeling your genius is a way to create on demand. It's a way to access higher and better innovative information faster without your brain getting too much in the way and messing it up, And then the system that I've developed to help creative professionals channel through their best ideas and create on demand also shows them how, not just to go off on the weekends and take a bunch of ayahuasca and have a vision, but rather to have that visionary state available 24/7, anytime. You can just reach out, touch that visionary state, download the great ideas, and then make it work in the real world, not just have some fanciful vision that you think about on your off time. So the people that tend to be called to me are people who are professional creatives. In other words, they're in some profession where they're literally paid for their great ideas. And that includes some renowned artists in the world are now working with me, executives who founded some of the largest companies that I can't mention, people who are known for innovating at a level that we haven't seen before. That's world-changing innovation level. Those are the people at the, at the high-level business people that come work with me, or for clearing, or for learning, or for going through these initiations so that they can access that power in themselves. And many times they are having their own surprise awakenings that, they're not going to go and join a new age church. They work with me because I did go to Stanford, and because I am a lawyer, and because I can speak the language of sense making as well as the language of spirit. And they, because it's a tender time for all of us. It has surprised me working with some of these folks, people who otherwise we might be a little starstruck by, because they're known to us, or because what they've created is so known to us. And yet they are as bamboozled by this intuitive as anyone, and really sharing everyone's longing to have deeper connection, deeper intimacy, deeper fulfillment, deeper meaning, which are all things that this level of life can give us. So that's a big part of my purpose here, is to work with leaders who are becoming channels. And then another big part of my purpose here is I have an online business school for intuitively gifted people. So there's also people who they've got the woo-woo, like they really have deep spiritual gifts, but they don't know yet how to make sense of them and package them and get those gifts activating good things in the world for good money. So I have a business school online for those people called Channel Your Genius Academy. So I tend to, and that's like my labor of love, honestly, because that's complicated. Making online courses and coaching people through starting their business. It's like a thing that some of my business mentors are like, why are you still doing that? You don't need to be doing that. You're making a lot of money over here with these, big wigs. But I really feel that it's like my give back, honestly. Especially after all those years thinking woo-woo was BS. I'm like, sorry, guys. Yeah, I'm sorry. And I feel like, wow, a lot of the business world just blows that stuff off. And I think that the business world and the spirit connected world have the answers for each other.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Yes.
And if only they would find the middle ground to connect and to weave spiritual empowerment into the righteous practice of business. And business is just the exchange of value. That's all business is. And so what I see is when we bring intuitive gifts and spirit into business, we are valuing spirit again. We are valuing what deeply matters. We are valuing the mystery, which is the meaning of life anyways. It's the stuff that we all actually care about more than anything else. And so to me, weaving spirituality with business is a profound healing for our global culture.
The way you've shared that has illuminated it for me in a way I've not quite seen before. I feel like my own journey has kind of such similarities to yours, but the way you've just said that, it's like I've clicked it into like, oh yes, it's exactly as you've just said.
Beautiful. That's awesome.
So beautiful. So we are coming up on time, which is really annoying because there is so much more to talk about. So I guess what feels it's interesting also to look at those two different places, you know, the ones that are already successful in business and opening up to that channeling their genius, and the other hand, ones that already have a sense of that and are. So I kind of feel like you pick which you want to talk to. And our listenership's mixed made of both. What would you say to them?
Here's how I am. I won't pick either because we're both have the same needs. And we all have the same needs. And a lot of people, when I share this sort of information, they go, where do you even start? You know, where do you even start then? Am I one of those people who's having this intuitive awakening? I kind of want to be. Where does that come from? And well, I'd want to, but I don't want to mess up my religion. I don't want to have to leave everything I know like she did and upset the apple cart, you know? And so firstly, I just want to speak to everyone and say, hey, you don't all have to be going through what either of us went through. It's okay. And your intuitive path is your own, and it does not need to look like mine or like Lian's or like anybody else's. So the first thing to do is to consider what is your own gift, right? And so I created actually a system and a little quiz. And what I identified is there's 5 core soul gift types. And there's the creators, who are people who really just understand systems naturally. They're kind of know-it-alls because they actually do know it all. You know, these people in your life, they just kind of know stuff. You're like, well, they usually know, so I'm going with it. And then there's the messengers, who I'm a messenger. I'm guessing you might be too, but we translate wisdom. Like we can talk a pretty penny. We love words and we love to be heard, and we feel so great when we can get the message across. And we've been that way since we were kids. We get up on the coffee table and want to give a speech. That's just how we are.
Yeah.
And then
that sounds like me.
Right? And then there's the transmitters. The transmitters are the souls who come into this world just to emanate a certain healing energy. They're very charismatic. They're beautiful, radiant people. And they don't naturally fit into some service role. And frankly, they don't really like to work for a living because they can feel that they are constantly emanating something that's their juju, you know, and people love it or they hate it, but they are this radiant being. And those are what I call the transmitters. They're usually deeply empathic, sensitive, psychic people. And the people that I end up working with, to address your earlier question, often have either transmitter has been their primary soul gift, and they've had it hidden under a lot of academia and sense making and professionalism, or it's like their secondary soul gift. So like you and I'm guessing, are both messengers first and transmitters second. And so we have this both thing. And then the other 2 soul gift types are the explorers, which are the ones, people that are just, they're here to press the limits. They just have to test everything. They have to be on the move and they have to be go. They have to test all the limits of everything to show us how to expand beyond them. And then the researchers, like my son, who are just always watching and very objective in how they see the world and how they see facts. So what I found is a really great first step, and the reason why I made the soul gift quiz, is to figure out which one of those you really, really, really are. Because what we find is that maybe you're actually a transmitter, but your whole life they've been training you to try and pretend like you're a systems person. Maybe you're really a messenger, but your whole life you've been trained to be a scientist or someone who's supposed to be a researcher. And so when you really discover what that core essential gift is, that you naturally bring, that you effortlessly bring the world, that tends to open up the channel
Just
so
to
that
know
you
it.
begin letting through what's really you. So that's why I encourage people to start there, to just start with the soul gift quiz. And it's also when people ask me, well, how could I play with you or work with you or understand more what the heck you're talking about? I say, well, go to the soul gift quiz and then start there. And then we're in touch and then you can talk to me. But it's also more than just talking to Mellissa. It will guide you through a process of discovering who you are at the essential that maybe was never encouraged or was purposefully hidden or it seems so easy to you that you think, well, I couldn't possibly make money from that. But actually that's the stuff that tends to be our greatest gift to the world.
Well, rather fabulously, that leads really neatly to me asking, where can they go find out about the Soul Gift Quiz?
So it's easy. I made it easy. It's just soulgiftquiz.com.
Oh,
soul,
perfect.
SOUL, giftquiz.com. And that will lead you, into whatever journey you desire to learn what intuitively is your core genius, what type of genius you're really here to channel. And then if you feel like talking to me, of course, you can just write me back from any of the emails you get after taking the quiz. You can also just take the quiz and not give me your email. If you're just curious to see what type you are and you don't really want to stay in touch with me, it's okay. You can skip this step. It's just, I'm really on a mission to support as many people as possible to tap that essential gift that we all have, so that we can use it in real life and make this world better for my kids. That's my selfish path there is to try and help this world be better for my kids and everybody's kids.
Oh my goodness. Mellissa, this has just been so juicy.
Oh, thank you. I'm just so pleased to be here and grateful for this connection that you and I have. And grateful to everyone for listening as well. And
wow. Yeah. There's just been, I definitely could continue talking for a lot longer. And again, I think this is going to be the first of many conversations.
Oh, I'd love to. Absolutely. Anytime. I would absolutely love to. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, wow. What a show. I just love that one. Here are my takeaways. Melissa's incredible story of coming into her soul gift so powerfully has aspects that are helpful for all of us. What really stood out to me was the portals that open at birth and death, and the way she's trusted what was coming through her and allowed it to bloom in her life. I loved what Mellissa said about it's time for us to bring business and spirit together. It's time for us to value spirit. The 5 types of soul gifts that Mellissa mentioned were creator, messenger, transmitter, and explorer, and researcher. Initially on the recording, she said that I was a messenger first and also a bit of a transmitter. But after we finished recording, she then said, actually, I'm pretty sure you're more a transmitter. And sure enough, I took the quiz that she mentioned just after we spoke, and I am indeed a transmitter. So go take the quiz and you'll find out what you are too. I'd love to know also. Do come to our group and share. And if you would like to get notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, including the link to the quiz, hop on over to the show notes and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 342. And if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, and as you've probably heard in the last few months, we have just got some absolute gold coming into your ears. So I don't think you will want to miss out. So head on over to Apple Podcast, Stitcher, or your app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode delivered auto-magically straight to your device as soon as it's released. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.